Hey everybody, we just finished up drawing our first rectangle on screen. In the next couple episodes, we're going to set things up so that we can draw rectangles anywhere on the screen, any number of rectangles, anytime we want. So the way things are set up right now with how we're using DirectX is what's called retained mode graphics. Basically what that means is you have to get things to work, you have to set up a bunch of stuff, use it, and then destroy it. And that works really well because that mimics what's going on the video card. But for people to use this, that can be a lot of not very useful. For example, we had to just get something on screen, we had to, in the initialization loop, set up all our vertices and indices just to get things going. But it's not super useful if we have to, every time we want a new thing, go ahead and put it in the initialization loop or step. Instead, we want a function that we can call anytime. Draw 2D FillRect. Take some parameters, do something. That we can call anytime. Well, if we put it, another problem is this fill 2D rect draw, this thing is in between a begin and end scene. We can't, even if we made something that mimicked what fill 2D draw is doing, we can only call it between begin and end scenes. So we need something else. We need to be able to take these function calls, kind of put them on a list, and then translate them into draw calls later. And then not even draw calls, we can just translate them into vertices in a draw buffer, or in a vertex buffer. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take our draw2d FillRect function. It's going to take some parameters, like a rect. Let's just go with some floats representing a rect. Left top, right bottom, a color, and put it on a list, and then translate that list into a vertex buffer, and then use that vertex buffer the same way we're doing right now to draw rectangles. So this is our FillRect function. We need, like I said, just like everything else, we need an init to allocate some memory, shut down, or update, dispose. We need a globals. And in here, we're going to put our list of drawable recs. I'm going to go ahead and call them a draw2d primitive, on the theory that we're going to extend this from rectangles here shortly. So a draw2d primitive right now will hold a rect and a color, and the globals will hold an array of primitives and a count. Go ahead and define the rect while we're here. Rect is basically these. We're going to go ahead and initialize this. We're going to make a global. We're going to initialize its variables. Size of primitives times, we're going to choose number. So when I said we could draw any, we're only going to be able to draw this many a frame, which is very reasonable. And we need to cast it. Cast the malloc. We need a free. on the other side. And we'll hold off on the update for now. But this FillRect will use this input to add to the list. So the thing we do, first we check if we're out of rectangles or primitives, max primitives, we need to probably log and then return. So very reasonable to ask for too many and then just drop them on the floor. And then otherwise, we're going to allocate it at 1. And we get a new primitive. And then we're going to just set the variables equal to the stuff we passed in. Left, top, right, bottom. There we go. So we've allocated, copied over the data. We need to make our log function. For now, I'm just going to, again, call output debug string. This isn't going to do it once, but we'll deal with that when we get to a debugging episode and error handling and all that stuff. Like, I've been really glossing over a lot of those things, but we'll tackle it eventually. Yeah, so, and then we need to go ahead and place our init in some place reasonable. So maybe after we've initialized DirectX, we can initialize our draw2D system. And before we dispose, we can dispose our draw2D system. And then we will go ahead and need something to test this out. So we're going to make a game update just to start things off, see how close, finally doing something gamey. And we're going to call these a function, draw2D FillRect, and we're going to 0, 0, and then right is greater and bottom is less than. Color red. And we'll draw a second one, green, and we'll move it to the right by 0.3. Okay, so that should be our update that gets called. And so then we need an update, and the update is to do make graphics work. And at the end of our update, we're going to clear out the number of primitives and reset. So make graphics work in one moment, but for now, we'll just debug all our new functions. Make sure they're all getting called and see what happens. Yeah, compiled. Crazy. So we are called it init. It's called right after DirectX init. We're mallocing. We've set up some memory. It's got a bunch of memory. It's empty. Now in our update loop, game update loop, calling fill, we have plenty of primitives. We should be at 0. We allocate a new one, so our first primitive on the list, full of garbage. We copy in our values. Now we have a valid primitive with real values, real color. Then we do it again. We're going to allocate a second primitive. Now we're at 2 primitives. We can go ahead and look at this array. That might be kind of fun. Garbage, but we have two valid rectangles. We get to, oh, and we're missing our direct, our free, or excuse me, our clear. So we're not calling yet direct draw2d update, and because I think the right place to put this is going to be right here, basically. We might even call this draw, because again, it's a drawing thing, it's not a simulation thing. And now we are clearing the primitives. Now we draw again. We're back to 0. We're allocating the 0th one. Cool. Let's make sure we get our dispose at the end. Dispose, we free our primitives, and we're done. So in the next one, we're going to hook up and translate these draw2d primitives into vertex buffers and index buffers. And with that, we should be able to see a bunch of recs on screen.